Good morning, Coach Liza here. Today we're going to talk about planks and a couple of plank variations, and specifically we're going to split them up into two different categories that I use when I'm programming for my athletes and for all of my clients. The two main functions of our core: anti-extension and anti-rotation. So anti-extension is being able to keep that neutral shape in our spine and not falling into an extension position. So if we can keep that pelvis tucked and in line so that we have a neutral lumbar spine, that's the anti-extension function of our core. And the other one is an anti-rotational function of our core. So if something is pulling us to the side and we're staying in that neutral plane, then that's an anti-rotational function of our core. I try and be very conscious about programming in one of each category into every session that I run with clients or athletes or classes. So talking about our basic plank first, I'm just going to be doing a forearm plank. For almost everyone, that is what I program. It's a little bit more challenging, and we can talk a little bit more about active planks when we're using a forearm plank. So my feet are going to be touching if that's available to me. If this is too hard and you're just starting out, we can always incline our upper body. We talk about that in push-ups. We can talk about that in planks also. So my shoulders are going to be directly over my elbows and my toes will be touching in the back. From there, we can talk about alignment. So most people will fall into an extension in their lumbar spine. That's going to be the first fault that we see. So we're going to talk about tucking that tailbone or neutralizing that lumbar spine first. From there, the other thing that we see as a fault is sinking into our upper body. So I usually tell clients to push the floor away. So we're looking for that neutral lumbar spine, and we're also looking for an active shoulder, not a passive shoulder. The last thing that we can do is we can try and pull our elbows down to our toes so we have a really active anterior core. So you won't see me moving, but you'll feel like you're pulling your elbows down the length of that mat. So that's our basic plank. If you can hold that for 2 minutes, research says that your risk of back pain and injury plummets. From there, we can talk about a side plank. And again, this can be really challenging when you're new to planks, so you can always incline that upper body. Again, we want to make sure we're stacked, so my elbow is directly beneath my shoulder. My ankles are flexed. Sometimes this is hard barefoot. We don't want those toes pointing away from us. We want them actively pulling up. So once, I can always use this hand to help me up, especially when I'm new to this. I'm going to make sure that I'm stacked directly shoulder over elbow, and then my ankles are nice and active. From there, I'm going to reach up. There's a couple variations that I like to program into side planks, especially once people get more proficient at them. So the first one is just an abduction of the top leg. So we're going to push into that plank. And same thing, I'm pushing away from the ground, so I'm not sagging into that shoulder or hip at all. Pushing my hips up, and I'm stacked. So this hip isn't forward and it's not back. From there, we're just going to lift that top leg, and we're going to try and keep it neutral too. So I'm not going toes up, but I'm going knee facing straight ahead. The next one I call thread the needle, but here's where we get into that anti-rotational property. I'm actually rotating and then unrotating. So I'm going to face the floor and then reach back up. So every time we go down and up, that's 1 rep. We're going to talk about one more plank. It's also in another video, but it's a great anti-rotational and anti-extension exercise. So in that regular plank, I'm going to alternate reaching one hand and extending out in front of me. And while I do that, I'm going to try my best not to rotate my hips at all. I'm going to stay solid in my trunk. So again, we're going to set up that plank. The only difference is I'm going to have some space between my feet this time. So I'm going to set up that plank, tuck that tailbone, push the floor away, and then I'm going to reach one arm and then the other. So you'll notice I'm moving a little bit, but if I wasn't trying at all, it would look a lot more like that. The other thing that people will do is push back. You want to make sure that that shoulder remains right above that elbow. So those are some of my favorite plank variations.